We're going to round out today with a discussion of the key takeaways from the last couple of days. So first I'd like to invite up on stage Peter Schniering, the founder and chief executive of Future Clean Tech Architects. Before founding the think tank, he's been working on accelerating clean tech innovation and served as a consultant to both the UNFCCC, the Secretariat in Bonn, as well as the International Energy Agency in Paris. Could I also invite Eleanor Webster, head of the Mission Innovation Secretariat? Thanks, Eleanor. She's been working in climate strategy for a number of organizations, NGOs, academia, and government. So you take a seat. And then if I could invite Roland Roesch, director of the IRENA Innovation and Technology Center. So I think Roland is just being fitted for a microphone, because we had a couple of limits. So what I'll do, everybody knows IRENA. So I think why not take a couple of seconds and introduce yourselves and what you do?
Sure.
Eleanor.
Great, thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Eleanor. I head up the Mission Innovation Secretariat. So for those that don't know, Mission Innovation is a global initiative that was set up in 2015 at COP21 by global leaders, including Obama at the time. And since then, we've evolved into essentially a government-private sector partnership initiative. And what we do is we work across a number of the different sectors being talked about in the last couple of days, which is very relevant to our work programme. But essentially what we seek to achieve is true collaboration on a number of the issues that are being talked about, and really bringing together the private sector and governments to try to break down some of these barriers. There's a number of different elements to our work programme. One of the main things, surprisingly enough, are missions. So we have 7 missions, one of them being a hydrogen mission, another one on green power future. And each of those missions look to bring together relevant parties around the world to tackle common issues. And we also have a number of different things, including a think tank, which we launched at our ministerial this year. And the expressions of interest are still open for topics for our think tank, but what we're looking to do is we have a global forum, we have a global reach, which is absolutely huge. So we're looking to maximise that, to bring together as many stakeholders as possible to talk about some of the topics that are coming up, particularly in the session that we just heard about on critical materials. So I'll stop talking there.
Lovely. Okay. Peter, do you want to tell us a little bit about Future Clean Tech Architects?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us and being on stage with Eleanor and Roland here, and you, of course. Yes, we're a climate innovation think tank, and we focus exclusively on the hardest to abate sector. So day 2 of Innovation Week is pretty much our day, and we have a dual approach. We do research projects ourselves, so we co-develop technologies, but the main part of our work is basically advocacy and translating scientific findings in a technology-agnostic way for decision makers, mainly political decision makers, but also investors and others. We're non-profit. You might have seen some of our work on the gallery. It's already been moved now to the new location, but we're doing, amongst others, the fact sheet series and movie series that's called The Basics and the Gaps.
Wonderful. So before we kick off, obviously, you are the most important people here. So we want to know what you actually think. So we're not going to be taking questions for this session, but we will be taking answers. So we want to know what you think are the top 3 innovations that have been discussed during the whole event so far that you think would accelerate the decarbonisation of end-use sectors the most. And what we're going to do is the more answers that come through, we're going to actually have a cloud that will tell us what you think is most exciting. And while we're waiting for your input, Roland, can I ask you to start? What are your most important takeaways from the day? And I know there are hundreds, and every time I hear a speech, I've got another one. Lucille, with her comment, it's climate change. You know, if we either all lose or we either all win. There's a message about collaboration there, which I've seen a lot. What's your top takeaway?
So thank you very much, Felicia. Also thank you to the colleagues here for being with us in this closing session. Let's say first and foremost, I have to say I'm very impressed by the good quality of presentations and the panel we had and the very lively discussions and also the good questions and discussion that came from the audience. So this is really outstanding, and this is kind of a more social aspect. If I talk about innovation and trying to summarize what we have seen these past days, I'm also very impressed by the list of things we have put together that comes out of this, and I try to be short, and I also try to wish, I wish that people understand that I cannot mention all the aspects, but from the key opening session we see and we heard that demand flexibility is key. We see also in many countries that large storage has to play an important role to basically avoid curtailment and save the power that is coming from electricity generated by wind and solar. On the same side, also digitalization needs more innovation to better integrate, especially the variable renewables like wind and solar. I think what has been said also in this opening session, more on the social side, so what is often discussed, so the just and fair transition, to make sure we leave nobody behind and we look at the perspectives of all countries and all people and how this energy transition can best serve them. On this aspect. So the second event on the power system infrastructure, there was a mentioning that smart electrification is key to the infrastructure planning, and that's the important point and message also from the IRENA Innovation Landscape Report is we have to make sure that these smart electrification innovations help to lower the investments into the extension of grid, which is needed for the energy transition, and to make sure that these innovations basically are beneficial for the public and for the governments that take the challenge of the energy sector transformation. Very important is that in many of the sessions it was said that the technology actually is ready, but then we have the systemic approach of IRENA. It is not about only technologies, enabling technologies. It is also about, the operation of these technologies, bringing the business models to life and make sure that the regulator and the policies follow and set the frameworks that are necessary to incentivize and support these new technologies. We need new investments in grids, that's clear, but also we have to find a way to make the most intelligent use of the infrastructure that is already in place. And this is exactly linked with reducing the investments needed. And first, think of what infrastructure do you have, how can you use it smart, how can you bring down the costs for these extensions of the infrastructure, and then go for a new infrastructure. I think it's clear we have to incentivize also the consumers, so specifically regulation and fair tariffs are needed there. On the side of electrifying the road transport, it is very clear we have to prioritize the demand flexibility. It is important to build up the infrastructure for electromobility, but also we have to find ways of bidirectional charging in helping basically the electromobility sector to decarbonize, and the electro vehicles have to help the grid to stabilize the grid and also reduce the emissions in the grid. So that's a bidirectional approach, which is really important. So here regulators play an important role in creating the playing field, in setting the scene to make those innovations which technically exist go ahead and we take use of them. Electrifying the buildings, they are getting end-use sectors actively to participate in solutions. Also incentives and regulation plays a role here. We have to make sure that the investments, and we had a big discussion here in Germany, that the investments you have to take into a new heating ways of heating your building in a heat pump or something is kind of amortizing. So that means the investments have to be amortized by the lower costs you have for the operation. That's very important. It is very clear that also on the heating and cooling sector and setting up the structure to finance all this, also for big heat pumps, international collaboration needs to be promoted and is necessary. Solutions to decarbonize the iron and steel sector. IRENA has worked on a G20 report there for the environment working group, and let's say many things have been discussed that we had from this report. It is important to use the materials in an efficient way we have available, the new materials that come in from mining. Scrap recycling is key. At the end, let's say when we ramp up the energy transition, and if we come closer to 2050, we should become very close to just use the steel we have in the system and recycle as much as possible. Then, of course, the process efficiency, there the industry has still potential to be harvested. And then on using green electricity in the processes to produce and to decarbonize and to deoxynize the steel is needed. It's obviously the only option that exists. But then to make a difference between the green steel, we need standardization, certification, and we have to make sure that there are incentives for the industry to invest in green steel making. Solutions to decarbonize the chemical and petrochemical sector. Here also the technology exists. There we have to find a balance between keeping up the competitiveness of the industry and doing the transition. And there also the regulator plays a key role, and we have to have very long-term, reliable regulatory frameworks that allow this industry to do these investments, which will last a very long time. On the grid evolution side, so transforming energy landscapes in developing countries and small island development stage, it's clear the grid modernization is the key to be able to carry these high shares of renewables and also to find ways to decarbonize the end-use sectors. So, and very important, IRENA is doing some work there also on the small islands development states, also to make sure that this new electrification and the new power systems should be resilient, also climate resilience for the future, which is a key thing. On shipping and aviation, it's very important, and we have seen this, to bring the shipping sector closer to the national energy planning of the countries and make sure that while we ramp up the green hydrogen production and that we use green hydrogen in the steel sector, in the chemical sector, and also in other transport sector, that we have to include the shipping sector into the logistics and make them an integral part which will help them to decarbonize the sectors. On the future materials in EV batteries, we have just seen it in the last session, moderated by my colleague Elizabeth Press. Critical materials is key, but it is not only about the mining, it is about innovation. So that means to reduce the use of critical materials. It is about finding ways in using other materials. And we already see, for instance, in the EV battery production, that it is very difficult to predict what materials have to come from mining and what materials are needed, because the innovative environment is so dynamic. But as discussed in this earlier session, it is very important to find different ways to make sure the critical materials are there for the energy transition. We in IRENA expect they will be tight at the beginning when we ramp up and do now the tripling of the renewable energies, which comes with the grid infrastructure, which comes with the battery and storage capacities. But in the longer term, also looking at innovation, looking on circularity, we are very positive that we can reach 2050 and do the energy transition with the critical materials available.
Fantastic.
Thank
That's
you.
an incredible overview of the last 2 days. I think one of the things that really sticks out to me is this question of resilience and the idea of education, because there's so many different groups and so many different stakeholders who are trying to find ways of understanding each other. And traditionally, they've often been in opposition to each other, so I think that's very challenging. But Peter, can I turn to you? What were your key takeaways from this session? And I know you've been taking notes in your innovation handbook, so I'm looking forward to hearing some interesting thoughts.
Yeah, I was told by the great IRENA team to please take notes for this session, so I tried. But I'll try to add to Roland's great summary of the sessions themselves. I have 2 more meta-level takeaways. One is, it's going to be hard. The part that's coming now, it's just going to be hard. We have to face it. Especially on day 2, we were talking hard to electrify, hard to abate sectors. And this means a couple of technologies still in early TRLs, technology readiness levels, even though that we've heard technology is there. Yes, it's there, but it's not been disseminated. It's not been grown. It's not mass produced. A second point on this, valleys of death for these technologies along the innovation stages everywhere. So it really takes smart, dedicated public and private money, but in particular public funding and support, smart policy tools that are effective along the way. And it will take prioritization. Nelson from ISC, drew upon it in the shipping and aviation panel, mentioning there is, and there will be for a long time, a limited amount of renewables available. So the supply, we were hearing that it takes more PPAs. The PPAs need to be available for the steel industry and for other. This is just going to be hard. And the second key takeaway, if I may, is we've been hearing repeatedly, we're all in this together, and it takes collaboration, of course. It takes many actors to cooperate. Yes, but let's also acknowledge it's a geostrategic race for the best spots, for those who will produce those technologies. And if we acknowledge it, we can as well embrace it. And I'd like to give 2 examples. There were 2 gentlemen today. One was Robert from ArcelorMittal, and the other was Carl from Norsk E-Fuels. Both were saying the Americans do it better. So the IRA is better and more efficient in building up the industry that's needed to then serve the market. And this is encouraging for organizations like us to go to Brussels and push them harder to adopt NZIA, Net Zero Industry Act, or other kind of tools. So these were sort of my 2 meta-level takes.
What I love about that is that part of the conversation, I remember it, but it was about the idea that what Europe is doing is creating the right policy environment. What the US is doing is financing control of that market, which is...
Or building up the industry to serve that market.
Yeah.
Then. It's simplified. Of course, it's provocative to some extent, but still, it's just, I think it's a positive challenge for everybody to get better. And we're all in this together, no doubt. But the most effective way, since resources are limited, R&D resources, public funding is limited in the end, and the challenge is huge, no matter where you go, shipping, aviation, the building sector, scaling renewables when the best spots are taken. We only have finite resources, so we need to be very smart how to use them.
That's finite resource and finite amount of time, which is a bit worrying. Eleanor, can I ask you what your takeaways were?
Yes, of course. And it's a perfect segue from what Peter was saying about sort of this idea of geostrategy. Because what I've heard is that the need for international collaboration is central to achieving everything that's been talked about. And that's something that Mission Innovation really do try to focus on. But one of my the key takeaways is that a lot of the challenges are inherent in so much of our international work all of the time. So Just Transition is facing down issues that are coming into this conversation that perhaps previously in the Industrial Revolution would not have been considered. And so we're trying to, it's a huge task in front of us. We're trying to break down barriers that are not just about energy. We're trying to look at regulation, trade, geopolitical relationships, bilateral and multilateral, all the way from mining on critical materials through to deployment. And what's the role of innovation? When do we stop learning is my second takeaway. Because obviously we're racing towards a 2030 target, and we're trying to do this in a very sustainable geopolitical way. But we mustn't just focus on that one target. We must keep thinking, is this technology still going to work in 8 or 9 years' time, and what do we need to be thinking about for the next generation coming through? Yeah. And the third takeaway is just about the challenges and the co-benefits. So what I'm really seeing in all the topics that have been discussed is that every single thing, so from hydrogen through to sustainable aviation fuels to critical materials, the impact on the environment, the impact on society, all of those things are being considered, which is extremely refreshing to hear, and I think we're on a really, really good track.
Well, what I love about that, when you mentioned innovation and the fact that you never stop learning, it's remembering that innovation is about so much more than technology. It's about changing the way in which we think. It's about bringing things together. It's actually very exciting to have been part of these conversations in the last couple of days. Now, one of the things I did want to actually ask, if you look up there, you will see the topics that the audience thinks are most important, the innovations that are going to help with decarbonisation. Now, one of the questions I have, electrification is right at the centre, but is electrification an innovation? What is it we actually need to do to speed up electrification? What are the innovations around it? So, Peter, you've got a smile on your face. Can you give me some thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds familiar in the type of challenges. Yes, what are the challenges, in our view, surrounding innovation when it comes to electrify everything? We can't electrify everything, but electrify as much as we possibly can because it's most effective. Well, I guess as the saturation of the grid with renewables increases, the last mile is the hardest by far. And so we need flexibility tools. We need long-duration storage. We need storage as such, but in particular we have a bias towards electrochemical systems, lithium-ion systems. We need long-duration storage. We created a fact sheet. There's 4 families. I don't want to go into details. And there's other flexibility options. For example, renewables that are capable to produce 24/7. There are these systems. They're in their infancy. The EU, for example, is doing great work on this at the moment. There's some great quota promoting those systems because they're still very expensive, but that can buffer when there's a so-called Dunkelflaute, as we say in Germany, so that the type of situation where you have little sunlight or no sunlight and little wind. And a couple of other flexibility tools. Plus, of course, there's all the demand side or the behind-the-meter type of innovation that needs to go on. It's a complete rethink, and that would probably have been the third takeaway. It takes outsiders to change it. Not only outsiders, but we've heard in the discussions on steel, in the discussions on aviation and shipping, that it's sometimes very helpful if somebody comes with a fresh perspective and not just with the incumbent's view, which we need as well, and transform sustainably. But it's very, very important to get the outside non-sector perspective.
Well, it's getting perspectives from all sides so that you can actually do that process of continuing to learn. So actually, Roland, I was going to turn to you and ask about demand-side flexibility because that was the next largest piece up there. But actually, what I'm interested in is what's the kind of innovation you want to see? What do you think? We've talked a lot about the different technological opportunities. Where do you think the greatest need for innovation is?
I think very typical is that you see electrification here in the center, no? And you explained it already very well. Let's say electrification is the keyword there because we know globally electrification will go up from 22% to 50+% in 2050, and it creates a lot of challenges that people feel there is innovation needed, and then you basically find many of the innovations that are needed to solve this electrify problem in a way with all this dimension to make sure we have efficient use of the electrification. The system works, they work 24 hours, all these aspects that have been mentioned. And the demand side aspect is a key thing, because the power system where we come from, it is very much supply driven. You know, you have a customer, he needs certain electrification, you organize it, and many years I did this in a utility, and we provided the electricity to the customer, and then we send a bill, and that it was. And now we have to bring, let's say, this demand side as a prosumer, as said, actively into play, and the composition in the power grids and let's say the capacity of the power grids in dealing with households that have an electromobile, that have a heat pump, that have themselves energy generation as PV panels on the roof, is kind of creating challenges. And let's say there we speak about distributed energy, and the system works basically from the bottom to the top, while it before worked from the top to the bottom. And of course, to make this happen and combine the electrons with bits, and all the concerns are related to this, requires a lot of innovation. We also believe that these technologies and innovations are there. The key challenge to overcome now is also to convince the policymakers, the one that operates the systems, and also the regulator, to take advantage of all these technologies exist. But of course, we have to accept the concerns that are there, because at the end, the regulator is responsible that the systems work, and we cannot just do experiments, so that has to go slowly. And this innovation, which is needed on the regulatory side and on the operation of systems and the market system, is still the old system. And while we have the technologies, we have now to make sure that the innovations also follow the demand side of things. So that's very important.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's one of the things that's been discussed a lot in the last couple of days, the fact that we need to get ministries to talk to each other and actually take into consideration other issues. But that makes me want to turn to you, Eleanor, because mission innovation, it's literally about having a mission to make innovation happen. So surely part of what you're doing is trying to convince policymakers and regulators, but also one of my favourite topics, innovative finance. Is that something you work with and work through? And how does that need to change in order to get change funded?
That's a good question. Thank you for that one. So I think we quite often reflect on what the word innovation means, both to us but more generally. And I think we think about innovation in terms of technology, but also through financial mechanisms, but also through regulatory systems. So innovation cannot happen without innovation across all of those different areas. And a huge amount of that is within the public sector, but some of that is in public sector and private sector relationships. So we really do focus quite closely on that. I think that something that we're really thoughtful about is not one size fits all with innovation. And that's what's really interesting to start to really dig deeper into, because it's all about cultural context, because electrification means something very different in different countries. It'll achieve different things and it'll allow different things. It will enable for people to do different things. And countries are on different trajectories socially and economically, and so their incentives are different, and therefore their innovation goals are different. So this whole end user idea is about being very sensitive to who are our end users and what are they looking for from this just transition. So for us, innovation is absolutely it's a huge enabler, but it cuts across all of those different factors, and the financial piece is something that's extremely complex. And I think that cultural significance is something that we're really trying to speak to stakeholders like the World Bank and the European Investment Bank to really think, there's so many complexities, which I won't get into now, obviously around lending and all of these kind of things. Yeah. But what is the role of the private sector? Where is it profitable? How can we make this work for the whole world? But what are those end user needs? And really thinking about those specific cultural contexts and how innovation across all of those different pieces can allow it to be successful.
Now, you see, I've got a question that automatically springs to mind from that, which is complexity. We're always talking about our complexity. How do we solve complexity? That's a little bit big, I realise, for this conversation, but what are the ways in which we can approach solving complexity for the need to accelerate renewables and have low-carbon electrification? Peter, why don't you go first?
Thank you.
Someone was going to have to.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, by again acknowledging it is involving many sectors at the same time. It's no longer a story, all the big puzzles that need to be solved, all the large challenges are basically between various sectors. And it takes sector coupling and it takes prioritization. And it takes, many of these technologies are capital intensive, long development cycles. It just takes a long breath. Reduce the complexity. Well, the best we can basically do, and IRENA is playing, I think, an important role in this, is going down to science-based advice. I could feel a lot with the colleague from the Energy Transitions Commission on the panel before when he said, these kind of myth-busting answers I have to give are frustrating me, and I can feel the same because a lot of energy and resources, and we're talking billions here, are being wasted on dead tracks, basically, on technologies where there's a better, more efficient, more cost-efficient alternative already in place. So reducing this complexity would be a first step. And then, of course, as much cross-border and international collaboration as possible, because it always helps. No country can solve it alone, even though some countries are doing an impressive development recently, of course. We've heard some examples over the past days. And then prioritize. There'll be not enough green hydrogen until 2050 all the time. We will always want more than we could probably get. I'm afraid even renewable electricity will remain scarce to some extent. And so it takes a smart plan and sort of take out of the equation everything we don't need. And that's the only way, I guess, we can reduce complexity.
Roland, do you have anything to add to that, about IRENA's approach to solving complexity?
Yeah, of course, that's one of IRENA's jobs, no? To solve the complexity and to prepare it for the stakeholders we have. And maybe if I elaborate a little bit on this one, of course, renewable energy technologies, enabling technologies, the related business model, how do we operate those systems, and let's say what regulation is needed is super complex in itself. And let's say we as IRENA, the Innovation and Technology Center, we approach this from the technology angle. And let's say people that are probably the first time here at the Innovation Week, they may think this is just a conference, but it is a conference with a very refined and elaborated approach. And let's say we think very much of the stakeholders of renewable energy technologies, the stakeholders of the energy transition, and the technical angle of it. And what we in reality do, and this is the fourth Innovation Week we do. We had one in 2016, in 2018, in 2020 due to the pandemic in virtual, and now 2023. We have a cycle where we basically speak with the top-level experts that we have in these Innovation Weeks. We discuss with them what are the topics, what needs to happen on the policy side to bring this energy transition forward. This gives us guidance of what are the key topics that we have to work out and to prepare. We, of course, discuss this with the policy, which the key stakeholders we have are our policy stakeholders. But then we basically we develop a concept of a report. So this time with the Innovation Landscape report, it was smart electrification, a guidance we got from this earlier innovation weeks. And then we start to structure this topic. We invite experts to virtual workshops where we get inputs and where we kind of find out what are the key points that needs to address to policymaker. We elaborate, we work work out the report, we write the report, we share it again with those experts, then we discuss the report also with policymakers, as the last innovation landscape report we launched with the European Commissioner, with the Energy Commissioner Kadri Simpson. We discuss it there, and then we bring this concept in a very structured way to the Innovation Week. We kind of fine-tune it and bring this now further basically to the climate conference, to the COP, but also to our assembly, where we have all the policymakers from our member countries, and we basically share with them the outcome, and we try to create awareness of what are the things that need to be addressed in policymaker. And there kind of the cycle closes, and there we hope to reduce the complexity in writing these reports and bringing these things in a very elaborated and structured way to the policymakers with guidance of what actions they need to take that this fits together. And there, of course, we have the opportunity to communicate about the needs of collaboration and cooperation between countries.
Excellent, thank you. Well, that's an excellent summation of what IRENA's role is in actually trying to address this, and how you actually help to accelerate that transition.
Exactly.
But Eleanor, perhaps you could explain to me, I didn't really get a chance to ask you about complexity, but you can always tell me how you'll solve complexity if you want to. But also I'd be really interested in what you see Mission Innovation's role as in actually accelerating this transition.
Sure, yeah, and I actually think it links to the complexity question, because I think our existence is there to try to break down the complexity in many ways. And it sort of speaks to both points, actually. So to Peter's point about prioritization, so one of the strengths of Mission Innovation is that we're constantly looking across the global piece at the government level, but also across what private sector are doing. And so we're always hearing about these sort of at a high level what's going on, and we're able to try to synthesize that, which is where the missions came from and why we're focusing on those. And then the other piece about that Roland was saying about collaboration. So Mission Innovation has 2 events every year, and I think we've seen since the pandemic in particular the strength of bringing people together on an international landscape, because it's not just about what people know, it's about their experiences, and we're evolving so quickly in this just transition that people are experiencing things every day that we're working on all of this stuff. So bringing people together to actually talk about it is really powerful. But I think in the long run, Mission Innovation really seeks to achieve is demonstrating how important political join-up is with the private sector, and how fostering that relationship can help break down some of the red tape that we've been hearing about here. But also, I think what we're looking to do is that prioritization piece. So if money was to start to be released from the World Bank or whatever more easily, where is that going to go? And why should it go there? So we're hoping to be able to advise on that narrative also.
So really, in many ways, we're talking about greasing the wheels of decision-making and funding allocation.
Make it sound so easy. Yes, that's exactly.
It's always really easy for talking about it, not trying to do it. Peter, can I ask you, what do you see the role of future clean tech architects as in the acceleration?
Well, I have to say again, reducing complexity, you've named it. So we try to look at various hardest to electrify or to abate sectors. For example, recently cement and the building industry, long duration energy storage, aviation right now. And we are trying to we use fact sheets, we use movies, we use bilateral briefings to boil it down to the essence of the challenge, understanding the technological side, which is sort of also our main avenue we go down, and then translate it into, combine it with the most effective policy tools we find across the world, basically. So not just looking at the member states in Europe, or not just looking at Germany, but then taking it to international outlets like this one, and discussing and sharing best practices.
So it really is about sharing best practice, communication, education, and reducing complexity. And on that note, I'm going to say thank you very, very much for joining us this afternoon. It's been great talking to you. Roland, I believe you're going to give us a very short concluding remarks for the event as a whole. Shall we?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here with us.
I want to go that way.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Yeah, the Innovation Week doesn't close with this. We have 2 more days to go tomorrow, but this is basically the bigger session that we had with many people here. I would like to thank you all, the panelists, the chairs of the panels, the moderator, the infographic person, and everyone that participated here in these 2 days of Innovation Week, especially for this very lively discussion, the good inputs, the interest, and the very exciting discussion of the topics we had. We take the guidance received in the meetings to work on the next innovation landscape report. As I explained this cycle, we have collected a lot of nuggets that we can use and elaborate further to the next innovation landscape report. We will write a short summary in summarizing each of these sessions more in detail and what we take from it and how we can take it further to the climate conference or also to the discussion with the policymakers from the IRENA membership. Also to inform our member states about the way we have done is a key thing. We will kind of bring it forward like this. So then I would, let's say, thank also our partners that have been contributing to, let's say, the preparation of the innovation landscape report, and that also enabled us to set up such a great program for this Innovation Week. And let's say our countries, our host countries, the United Arab Emirates and Germany for enabling our work, and all the countries that support us with their contributions, that we can make sure we can keep up the good work and contribute to this. Also, I would like to thank the city of Bonn. We will also have a reception at the city of Bonn. I think this place of Bonn to work with all the international organizations here is a great place to have such an innovation week and to have such a discussion also with all the think tanks and innovators that are around here. So thanks to Bundeskunsthalle, I think we had a great venue for the event. Also, we had very good weather, and I hope that we all that you all could enjoy the networking, the connecting, and the discussion also outside these forums and meetings. And then, last but not least, very important for me, I would like to thank all the IRENA staff that has done a hard work in the past weeks to set up the scene and set up the venues and develop the concept notes and topics for this, and also all the logistics and everything that we had to do to make this a great event further on. Thank you all, and I look forward to a nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to formally close this session and say, don't forget, we're starting again tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. at the ITC. So if you have your badges, if you're going to be leaving, could you hand them in at the desk so we can recycle? Otherwise, keep it on you because you'll need it to sort of get around. The evening reception is at the City Hall. The building is Altes Rathaus, but you can find the details at the desks. Thank you all for being part of it. It's been enormous fun. I feel like I've learned a lot and I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. So hope to see you soon. Thanks. As ever, I'm afraid, I did forget something because I'm doing that a lot. We do have to actually clear the building quite quickly because they extended security. So if we could all try and get our stuff and leave ASAP, that would be brilliant.